What's up, y'all? So, this thing that I'm going to be trying to do every Wednesday, because I know a lot of you guys don't read. Either you can't read or you refuse to read. And you cannot be a communist revolutionary if you don't read, if you don't study, and most importantly, if you don't apply what you read and study. So, every Wednesday, I'm going to be reading theory and discussing it for and with you guys. I'm going to leave the comments open because we're not a bourgeois dictatorship. So, to kick off this new series, I'm going to be talking about Robert F. Williams. Most of you guys already know who Robert F. Williams is. If you don't, you really should. So, who was Robert F. Williams? Robert F. Williams was a black proletarian from Monroe, North Carolina, a Marine veteran. I believe he saw combat in Korea, and he came home. He moved to Detroit to work in one of the auto factories up there, but eventually was called back to his native territory and ended up heading up the NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina. So at the time that he was organizing, the mid to late 50s, early 60s, the NAACP was widely regarded as a bourgeois liberal organization at the very best. It was not a revolutionary organization. It was an organization that focused heavily on legalism, on court struggles, on court cases, etc. So Robert F. Williams, because he was a black proletarian, a black working class dude from the South, was not a pacifist. He really did not go in for all of the bourgeois legalism that the NAACP promoted. He was like, you know what? If somebody comes after my people, if the Klan comes after my people, if the government comes after my people have the right to arm ourselves and defend ourselves. This was a very common sentiment among black people in the South during this period. Why? Because if you know anything about the South, both black and white and indigenous people have a very strong gun culture. Like what people understand is that like we were not disarmed, disorganized prey for the Klan. Okay, like we were literally we were armed to the teeth. You had people that hunted, you had people that like a pistol was a part of your day-to-day outfit. Like if you left, you tucked your pistol in your overalls. Why? Because you never know who you would meet, you never know who you would come across. um you never know what type of situation you would find yourself into. So guns were very important to the black working class in the South, the black rural proletarians and industrial proletarians. Everybody had a fucking gun. So keeping that culture that Comrade Elder Robert F. Williams came from in mind, he actually developed a black chapter of the National Rifle Association in Monroe, North Carolina. And it was affiliated with the NAACP. And the purpose of this organization was to prevent Klan violence from disrupting and starting shit in the black community. So basically, Robert F. Williams was about black people have the right to defend ourselves. We are not going to sit by and meekly rely on the white run federal government to defend us. And if you know anything about Malcolm X, he said the same thing. And the reason why people like Malcolm X and Robert F. Williams were more popular amongst the black working class was because they told us what we already knew and they affirmed what the black working class already knew. Like, no, you're not going to. It is unnatural to just sit back and let your enemy shoot and blow your churches up and do horrible things to women and not fight back. So that's what Robert F. Williams was about. He ended up being driven out of the country into exile. He first went to Cuba, but he ran into some contradictions with the government there. So he ended up in socialist China at the height of the Cultural Revolution. Why was he in exile? Because he actually tried to protect some white people that had inadvertently driven into his neighborhood during an upsurge in racist violence from white people. And to prevent a retaliatory attack, Robert F. Williams and his wife, Mabel, took these people into his house. The people literally said that, yeah, they literally protected us from being fucked up, but the FBI wasn't hearing it, so they've tried to frame him and railroad him for kidnapping, and as a result, Brother Elder Comrade Williams was forced to flee the country, where he established Radio Free Dixie from Cuba, but he was in the habit of criticizing the Cuban government and its orientation towards Soviet revisionism, so he ended up fleeing to China, where he met Comrade Mao and Zhou Enlai and Zhou Qing and many, many other cadres. So he also published a newsletter called the Crusader. That wouldn't be my choice of name, but So be it. Also, Robert F. Williams never really identified as a communist. Like to his dying day, he was a proud Marine veteran, and he flew a U.S. flag in his front yard. So just I guess, an example of the uneven consciousness of the masses and uneven consciousness of people who can be pretty dope. So, uh, this is Volume 3, Number 9 of the Crusader Monthly Newsletter. Robert F. Williams, editor, in exile. May 1962. Afro-Americans and Slick John Kennedy. Okay, so he was very good at political cartoons. So, let's see. This is JFK. Very um, strangely drawn. But you have the KKK, and they have a Nazi swastika on their handbag. And this is charted up as a sex worker. So you have JFK here beckoning to this KKK fascist. So you've got this drunken capitalist staggering out of a bar / hotel labeled white only diplomats. Hey, baby, if you're ever in need, call me at the White House. So funny. Afro-Americans and Slick John Kennedy. The government of the United States is no government of the Afro-Americans at all. The Slick John Kennedy gang is operating one of the greatest sham governments in the entire world. Afro-Americans and fair-minded whites, not too many of those, must be gullible indeed to believe that the racist KKK-dominated so-called U.S. government is concerned with the welfare and human rights of colored people. The colored people of the USA must bring themselves to realize that token integration is a slick maneuver to check the restlessness of an oppressed people fast becoming infected with the germ of total resistance policy developing among all of the oppressed peoples of the world. So this is proletarian internationalism. Token integration means nothing to the masses. This is true. Like, what the fuck is the point of being able to go to an expensive hotel or eat a fucking hamburger when you can't afford the damn hamburger? Martin Luther King developed the same analysis. Like, if your analysis is like, oh, yay, we could go to Harvard now. Like, okay, so fucking what? How does that improve the life of a sharecropper in Inabita, Mississippi? How does that improve the life of a black steel mill worker in Birmingham, Alabama, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? If you don't orient yourself towards the masses, then you're not orienting yourself towards anything, and you're rooting yourself in a sandcastle. That's exactly what the black bourgeoisie is, the black petty bourgeoisie. For one, it's tiny. The black bourgeoisie might as well not exist, and the black petty bourgeoisie is constantly at risk of proletarianization, like all elements of the petty bourgeoisie. So you have to root yourself in the proletariat, and to a lesser extent in the lumpen proletariat, which must be proletarianized. Otherwise, you're fucking up. You're building a sandcastle that's going to be washed away with the tide. Even an idiot should be able to see that the so-called token integration is no more than window dressing designed to lull the poor, downtrodden African-American to sleep and to make the outside world think that the racist, savage USA is a fountainhead of social justice and democracy. So he brought this up because this was in the context of the Cold War, right? So you had dozens of Latin American and Latin American countries that were starting to come into open contradiction with Yankee imperialism. You had dozens of African countries and Asian countries that were becoming independent, that were decolonizing. Of course, they were still subject to neocolonialism, as we know now, but you had these countries that were decolonizing, and the question was, would these countries orient towards the United States? Or would these countries orient towards the socialist bloc, the USSR, and later on China and the Eastern Bloc? So the main impetus that was driving a lot of this civil rights thaw, I guess, in the federal government, because before the federal government didn't give a fuck. So the reason why the American government suddenly took such an interest in civil rights was not because these people suddenly developed a conscience, okay? The people who are responsible for aiding the Zionists in destroying the people of Palestine have no conscience, as Kwame Ture said. The reason why the United States government under JFK, under LBJ, under RFK, all these three-letter acronyms, the reason why the United States government suddenly took an interest in civil rights was because they did not want to be shown up, because the Soviets used that shit for propaganda. The Soviets used this shit for propaganda. They were like, hey, you want to align with the United States? You're black. You're Tanzanian. Okay, cool. This is how they treat people that look like you over there. Meantime, we're going to bring you to Moscow. Later on, we're going to bring you to Peking, and we're going to teach you how to build up your country. We're going to teach you engineering. We're going to train you guys for arms struggle if you're still engaged in that. What did the United States have to offer? Louis Armstrong? Okay, yeah, damn good horn player. But that just shows, like, okay, yeah, we as African Americans, as Black Americans, as New Africans, whatever you call us, Black people in the United States who have our roots that go all the way back to slavery, yes, we make some very, very good cultural product, but we have to keep those cultural products to ourselves, not use them in the service of Yankee imperialism. The Afro American in the USA is facing his greatest crisis since chattel slavery. All forms of violence and underhanded methods of extermination are being stepped up against our people. Contrary to what big daddies and their good Negroes would have us believe about all of the phony progress that they claim the race is making, the true status of the African American is steadily on a downturn. This was written in 1962. So from 1962 to 2024, he was correct. Like our situation hasn't got better just because we had Obama in the White House. Our situation hasn't got better just because we have, Harvard Law School only admitted 19 Black people after the overturn of affirmative action. Racists going to be like, oh yeah, see, you guys couldn't have gotten in without affirmative action. No, Harvard has always been a racist institution. It profited off of slaves, for fuck's sake. They did not want us there in the first place. So Huey P. Newton also predicted the eventual decline of the industrial proletariat. I guess you could say that my Maoist elders in the 70s got it all wrong. Like, why would you root yourself in an industry that's being destroyed by neoliberalism? I don't know. Communists have never been the smartest of people, I guess, at least in the West. So, yeah, our situation was fucked. If you're the lowest paid, last hired, first fired, neoliberalism is going to hit you like a ton of bricks. So, he's correct in this sense. These mercenary Afro-Americans who pander to self-respect and prostitute the human dignity of the race for crumbs from their white masters' tables are helping to forge the nails for their own caskets. Have they not learned anything from the lesson of the history of the Jews in Nazi Germany? All the world knows how many Jews sold out their race hoping to gain insulation for themselves. It is common knowledge that the only privilege they won was the right to go to the gas chamber last. Yeah, the capos got it too. Now they are just as dead as the ones who went first. Already the colored people of the U.S. are plagued with mass arrests, attacks by vicious Nazi-trained police dogs, and victims of gun and club-happy racist policemen. Already our people are victims of mass unemployment, official conspiracies of starvation, and Ku Klux Klan terror backed by the U.S. Justice Department. Already the racist fascists are laying out the groundwork for a mass exodus. Our people must not forget how the Nazis loaded the Jews on death trains under the pretense of sending workers to other locations when they were really destined for the extermination chambers. It goes without saying that the Afro-American is not wanted in the USA anymore. We were seen as being surplus population. This is also true. This is why a lot of Black nationalists back in the day did not want shit to do with abortion. They thought that abortion was a white man's plot to eradicate our people and stop us from having kids because we were seen as being a surplus population. We were useful. We were valuable property during slavery, but after slavery, America really did not have any use for us anymore. That's why most of the white abolitionists in the United States wanted to send us back to Africa, because they did not want us here competing with free white labor. Yeah. Machinery and poor white workers are fast replacing the African American proletariat. Where is Slick John Kennedy while all of this KKK and Minuteman racist terror is being visited upon our people? Yes, he is saber-rattling and boasting of how he will defend the democratic rights of ex-Nazis in Berlin. He is threatening nuclear war in behalf of so-called democratic rights for people in faraway places very seldom heard of in the USA. Slick John Kennedy, the far-sighted humanitarian, was very swift in setting up emergency funds and centers for so-called Cuban refugees. This same hypocrite who rode to office on the vote of the Black people now winks at the plight of Afro-Americans who became refugees from racist terror. Rather than set up great funds and location centers for colored refugees, Slick John prefers to fake a bleeding heart for everyone but Afro-Americans, whom he expects to cry with him because the world no longer sees the master race of the USA as God's chosen people to rule the universe. Slick JFK is swift to sick his fascist running dog, FBI, on innocent Afro Americans who refuse to be lynched by the KKK, but he merely shrugs when an Afro American soldier is murdered by racists. When Afro Americans are murdered by racists in the South, Slick John proclaims it a local matter out of the jurisdiction of the racist Justice Department. Afro Americans are kidding themselves when they think that they can expect the U.S. racist government to respect their rights as human beings. The FBI, the Minutemen, and the KKK are of the same ilk. Who were the Minutemen, okay? So the Minutemen were basically they were basically 3%ers before there were 3%ers. White Americans are going to be a minority in 2052. That's why they're so scared. That's why they're banning abortion. I think I explained this earlier, but white people are not, white people are banning abortion because they are afraid of their own demographic collapse. It has nothing to do with Christianity. It has nothing to do with the sanctity of the unborn. It is a cold strategic move because white women are, rightfully so, rejecting the prior status of being barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. So white men, it's always white men pushing this shit. White men are upset, and that's why they're trying to, they don't care if every black kid gets aborted, okay? Like, they literally used to sterilize black and Latina women and indigenous women. But that's a no-no for white women because they want their demographics to remain strong, but it's not going to work. There's too many contradictions. So the Minutemen were basically the 3%ers, very racist, reactionary group, very heavily armed group as well. They literally had training camps in Arizona and California. And they also were in the habit of doing the very early vigilante border patrols that everybody knows and loves right now. Yeah, they started that shit. There is no class immunity for Afro Americans. When mass terror breaks out, all people of color are targets. Turn the other cheekism is no survival tactic for a jungle filled with wild beasts and savages, presided over by an impotent witch doctor, Slick John Kennedy, whose magic potions only work in faraway places. I love his rhetoric. Hands across to Mason Dixon. It is shameful that a so called liberal governor of a great state like Ohio is not a great state, would conspire with the racist sewer line politician like Terry Sanford of North Carolina to surrender an Afro American mother to a den of rattlesnakes called lawmen and court officials of a heathen state. North Carolina's brand of justice is slander to the whole civilized race. Only an idiot of the first magnitude would ever dare think that a colored person could get justice in North Carolina, and most of all, in that dung heap called Monroe. It is not even a moot question. If there were ever any doubt, the whole world should know by now that Governor DeSalle's decision to extradite Mrs. May Mallory back to the sharks in Monroe, who falsely brought kidnap charges against human rights fighters, is proof that the racist politicians of the North and South are birds of a feather. The Mallory case reminds us once more that no Afro-American is out of reach of the Klan justice so long as he is on soil presided over by racists. It is an indictment of American justice to have a northern state collaborate with the South in illegal lynching. The Mallory case proves that even a northern state like Ohio is not half as humane as integrated Cuba. Realizing how Fidel Castro feels about racial injustice, the racist U.S. government has not even bothered to ask Cuba to return an Afro-American to North Carolina lynch justice. It has limited its request to members of its own political club and racist cohorts. Terry Sanford knows that he can depend on a chum like DeSalle to return his fugitive slaves. It is time for the decent people of the world to speak out against jungle law in the so-called leader of the free world for white only. May Mallory must not be returned to Monroe's Klan justice. This is a hilarious one. The disease of bigots. The racists of the USA suffer from mass psychoneurosis. Their minds have become so twisted out of normal proportions that they have become mental cases. They possess warped personalities that have forced them out of the realm of natural readjustment. The racist bigots of the USA are monomaniacs when race is involved. Many are perfectly normal in every subject but the one encompassing human rights for colored people. A brilliant college professor or scientist who is a bigot may possess an open mind and high intellectual integrity in every field but that of race relations. In this realm, he may react as a blind fanatic whose sensibilities are as insensate as the most rabid racist of the backwoods. His insensate nature makes him immune to logic. In fact, that serves as a stimulus to normal people with open minds. When individuals' personalities become divorced from reality and insensible to the stimulus of a normal environment, the best antidote is a shock that registers and revives the sensible capabilities to the state of reality. The Afro-American has been subjected to racism and persecution for almost 400 years in the New World. Common sense dictates that white oppressors who have been unable to develop a humane attitude in a just sense state of human intercourse, indicative of a civilized society in 4 centuries, are incapable of doing so voluntarily merely from the standpoint of social readjustment. It must also be realized that an oppressed people who have meekly submitted to the every whim of such a deranged personality cannot possibly have completely escaped unscarred. Too many Afro Americans have, for too long, even though unwillingly, played an accommodating pretenders game in a vain effort to pacify the hopeless lunatics. In the past, when this all powerful lunatic with his homicidal tendencies insisted that he was God Almighty, for the sake of survival, it may have been necessary to go along with him. This is no longer the case, because he is no longer the supreme power in the world. Afro Americans must stop playing the accommodating lunatics game. We must shock him back to reality. Afro Americans must stop pretending to go along with insane racism. No sane person is willing to wear a badge of inferiority. No sane person is satisfied to live a life under a caste system of and precious to spend under terrifying conditions as a subhuman. We must let the entire world know that we are not satisfied with racism in the USA. We must let the racist brute himself know that we are no longer going to play his idiot's game. We must also serve notice on the world that until we are willing to help place him in a straitjacket, until he is Marines, tactical shit that he picked up in the Marines. I'm obviously not going to read that stuff on here because I don't want to get banned. But yeah, you should definitely check it out. So, what was I guess the context in which this guy existed? I already explained it. He was under the thumb of a supremely racist, fascist government in Monroe, North Carolina, and was driven into exile from, even though he referred to his hometown as a dung pile, he ended up right back there. So, um, I'm not going to call him a historical fossil because he's not. Like everything that he wrote is still relevant. Like you do not have to sit and kowtow to these people that want to eradicate and destroy you. As a matter of fact, if you do that, there's something wrong with you. But he was really really good at using language that would definitely not be cast as woke today. Um, but it resonated with a lot of people. There we go. Yeah, I don't know what was going on. Let's see what else. Yeah, he also was really into poetry. The day that need not have been. It was a day when reason and wisdom gave way to madness, when poets and priests became drunk with the nectar of folly, when the gods of greed and hatred danced to the music of thunder, and in their passion of orgy for sensual pleasure, they made toasts from the blood of life. Oh, stravel to you, cigarette enjoyer. Tyranny became the commanders of their souls, and their minds became slaves of vain glory and vanity. Ignorance and superstition reigned as king and queen in the courts of mocked justice. This was the day that the innocent suckling who cried for the nurture of milk was nursed on the champagne of death. This guy needed a proofreader. This was the day of destiny when guilt became the child of indifference and silence. This was the day when sane men who had cried vainly in the wilderness of madness stood in terror at the fulfillment of their prophecy. In horrified contempt, they scorned and mocked the barons with their fool's gold. For this day of universal horror and doom was a day that need not have been. The whole world, at least, was illuminated. For once, all men were equal. All men were the condemned. Judges became the judged. Executioners witnessed their own execution. That sounds painful. And the hordes of the just and unjust. Those who had made a greater sword perished by the sword. The giant skyscrapers and sets of barons had built to store up their treasures quivered momentarily and then fell as dust and ashes to the earth. Wow, did he predict 9/11? My God. The illuminated sky became dark with twirling clouds of smoke. The mad, turbulent winds became hurricanes and cyclones of fire. The sea spilled over its boundaries, and silence and peace reigned supreme. The ravaging vulture that had strived on death and decay fell inanimately to earth. He too became part of what had been his life. The world was at peace now, the only peace since creation. All mankind had a common bond. There were no kings or paupers. All men were the same. They were the disinherited of the earth. Deep in the darkness of earth, life faintly glowed. Through default, the amoeba had inherited Earth again. He was king over a dominion that the lofty man squandered. Yes, the lowest of creatures became king on that day that need not have been. And it's a really, really good news organ. Of course, it has Robert F. Williams' spin, but my spin is very similar to Bastard. My spin is very similar to Robert F. Williams. But he definitely had some adventurous tendencies. Like in his advice, he literally provides later on. He provides stuff about how to ruin a sewer system in an entire city. Oh, what's this? Oh, let's see what he says about Jimmy Hoffa. Long before the present wrangle over integration, the Teamsters in some of the major southern cities advocated equal pay to colored and white workers of the same classification. In Charlotte, North Carolina, to mention one such place, colored members of the Teamsters have long enjoyed equal work rights and pay. Why did the Kennedys hate James Hoffa and are more determined to destroy his elective leadership than such a scoundrel as Ross Barnett? You know, a lot of people think that the Teamsters and the fucking mafia had something to do with JFK getting hit. Like, Hoffa could not stand Hoffa could not stand fucking JFK because he started investigating him along with RFK. So yeah. Protest Party. The political hounds of the social jungle called Free World Democracy are playing Afro-Americans and poor whites for suckers. The slick politicians are playing with the destiny of the American people for the sole purpose of personal enrichment and self-aggrandizement. Voter registration should be encouraged, but there should also be encouragement for a protest vote of no confidence. Wow, SMC and groundwork in DSA would not like that one. For the next national elections, what about a protest vote on a write-in protest ballot in a protest party? I'd fuck with it. So, a lot of old news, but it's interesting. Like um this is how leftists and communists should write. Like whenever I read our shit, it's either overblown or it's not overblown enough. Another poem. The road to nowhere. Friend, may I implore the time and day, and where journeyeth those who pass this way? Tell me, my good woman or man, who are these strange creatures of this mystic land? Seemingly wise and yet more vain, he or she confronted me with the sex I could not ascertain, and in a mumbled voice cited a meaningless time, giving me bearings in some nameless clime. The sojourner stood arrogantly astute and pointed aimlessly down the maze of the cloverleaf route. This one's east and this one's west, said he or she, remotely nodding. It was a maze of Greek to me, and endlessly hurried those who passed that way, with their pallid faces looking stern and gray. And thereupon this highway main, past the thunderous age, soulless and vain. I asked of the weird traveler where the vicious circles run. No special place, said he, it's just for fun. Such an elaborate structure as this leads neither to heaven nor hell, nor to some saintly place where one can nobly dwell. And asked I of the one to the left, oh, that one's to escape from death. His pallid face looked numb, and asked he, have you never heard of the bomb? This is an evacuation route, my friend, inquired I, to where and when. On the day of the bomb, he seriously said, never seriously seeming to think that the roads are not needed by the dead. And so is the wisdom of vain man who rides an aimless circuit in a strange land. Oh, what wise men, creators, builders astute, masters of escape, Pied Piper of the evacuation route. Robert F. Williams, Hotel Capri, room number 1405, Arpatado, 6032, Havana, Cuba. So meditate on that and read The Crusader. Don't be a crusader, read it.